I still remember the exact moment everything cracked. It was Christmas Eve, the kind that looks perfect from the outside. Warm lights, soft music playing somewhere in the background, the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey filling the house. My mom had gone all out, like she always did when she wanted things to look like a happy family. And for a while, I almost believed it. Then my grandfather, who I hadn't seen in almost 3 years, set his fork down, looked straight at me, and asked, very casually, "Did you like the house I gave you 2 years ago?" I laughed. Not because it was funny. More like my brain didn't know what else to do. "The house," I said. "What house?" He didn't smile back. And that's when I noticed it. The silence. Not normal silence. Not the kind where people are just chewing or waiting for someone to pass the salt. This was heavy. Like the air itself got thicker. I looked around the table. My dad wasn't eating anymore. His hand had frozen midair, still holding his glass. My mom's face. I don't know how to explain it. It was like all the color drained out at once. And my younger brother, Caleb, who usually never shuts up, was suddenly very interested in his plate. That's when my stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Something big. My name is Betrayal Carter. I'm 27, and if you had told me that the biggest betrayal of my life would come from the people who raised me, I probably would have laughed it off. Not because my family was perfect, but because I thought I understood the kind of problems we had. Turns out, I didn't even scratch the surface. Growing up, I was the responsible one, not the favorite. That was never me. That title belonged to Caleb. He was 2 years younger, louder, funnier, and somehow always got away with things I would have been grounded for. My parents called it personality. I called it a double standard, but I learned early on that saying that out loud didn't get me anywhere. So I adjusted. I got good grades. I stayed out of trouble. I worked part-time as soon as I could. I became easy. Low maintenance. Looking back, I don't know if that was maturity or just survival. Probably both. My mom, Denise, cared a lot about appearances. Not in a superficial way exactly, more like she needed everything to look okay, even when it wasn't. We didn't talk about problems. We smoothed them over. My dad, Robert, was quieter. Not unkind, just distant. He worked long hours, came home tired, and avoided conflict like it was contagious. So, if something unfair happened, it stayed unfair. And life moved on. College was my way out. Not dramatically. I didn't storm out or cut ties or anything like that. I just left. I got into a decent university about 4 hours away. Took out loans. Picked up 2 part-time jobs. Slept less than I should have. But for the first time, I felt like my life was actually mine. I visited home on holidays. Called when I could.
Kept things polite.
Surface level. It worked. Until it didn't. 2 years before that Christmas dinner, something strange happened. My grandfather, Arthur Carter, called me out of nowhere. Now, that alone was unusual. He wasn't the type to call just to chat. He was old school. Formal. The kind of man who believed conversations should have a purpose. "Brielle," he said, his voice still sharp despite his age, "I need to confirm your mailing address." I remember frowning, sitting on the edge of my tiny apartment bed. "For what?" I asked. "A matter that concerns you," he replied. Very helpful. I gave him my address anyway. And then nothing. No package. No letter. No follow-up. I figured maybe he forgot. Or changed his mind. Or maybe it was something small that didn't matter. Life was busy. I didn't chase it. Maybe I should have. A few months later, my parents mentioned that Grandpa had been sorting out his assets. That's how my mom put it. Assets. Like we were talking about stocks, not people. "He's getting older," she said casually over the phone. "Just organizing things." "Okay," I said. "Does that involve me somehow?" A pause. Then, "Not really. Just general stuff." I didn't push. Again, maybe I should have. Around that same time, I hit a rough patch. My rent went up unexpectedly. One of my jobs cut my hours. I was barely keeping up with bills, and I remember calling my mom one night, not even to ask for money, just to talk. "I'm just stressed," I admitted. "Everything's piling up." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "Well, that's part of being an adult, Brielle. You'll figure it out." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me.
"Yeah,
I know. And that was that. No follow-up. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Do you need help?" I hung up feeling smaller. Not angry. Just alone. Meanwhile, Caleb was thriving. At least, that's what I was told. My parents kept mentioning his new opportunities, his plans, how he was really stepping up. I was genuinely happy for him. But sometimes I noticed something odd. Whenever I asked for details, what exactly he was doing, where he was working, how he was managing financially, the answers were always vague. He's figuring things out. He's got support. He's in a good place. It didn't add up, but again, I didn't dig. I had my own problems. Fast forward to that Christmas Eve. Back at the table. My grandfather was still looking at me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. What house? I repeated, a little slower this time. He blinked. You're telling me, he said carefully, that you never received the property deed I transferred to you 2 years ago? I felt my heart start to pound. Grandpa, I don't know what you're talking about. He turned his head, slowly, toward my parents. And I swear I've never seen two people look so exposed. Like someone had just pulled a curtain back. Robert, he said, his voice low now. Denise, would you care to explain? My mom opened her mouth, closed it. My dad cleared his throat, but no words came out. Caleb shifted in his seat. Wait, I said, my voice shaking a little despite myself. Explain what? No one answered me. That's when something inside me clicked. All those vague answers. The silence. The way certain topics were always brushed aside. It wasn't random. It was intentional. And I had a feeling I was about to find out why. Betrayal, my mom finally said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe this isn't the best time? No, my grandfather cut in. Sharp. Final. This is exactly the time. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded set of papers. Old, slightly worn, deliberate. I arranged for a house to be transferred into Betrayal's name, he said, placing the papers on the table. A small property, nothing extravagant, but fully paid. No mortgage. No debt. My ears started ringing. A house. Fully paid. 2 years ago. While I was struggling to cover rent. While I was working double shifts. While I called my mom, stressed and exhausted, and got told to figure it out. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So where is it? I asked quietly. No one spoke. I looked at my dad. Dad. He rubbed his forehead. It's complicated. I almost laughed. No, I said. It's actually really simple. Either I have a house or I don't. Silence. Then Caleb muttered, barely audible. You don't. I turned to him. What do you mean, I don't? He didn't meet my eyes. And suddenly I knew. Or, at least part of it. I looked back at my parents. And this time, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. Tell me the truth, I said. My mom's hands were trembling now. It was temporary, she said quickly. We were going to fix it. Fix what? My grandfather's voice cut through again. Cold. Controlled. And honestly, a little terrifying. What exactly did you do with the property I gave my granddaughter? My dad finally spoke. Quiet. Defeated. We transferred it. My chest tightened. Transferred it to who? No one answered. But they didn't have to. I slowly turned my head and looked at Caleb. He still wasn't looking at me. I don't know why, but in that moment, everything went very, very clear. Not blurry. Not overwhelming. Clear. Like a puzzle finally snapping into place. The vague answers. The sudden success. The financial stability no one could explain. The way my struggles were dismissed so easily. Because they already knew something I didn't. I swallowed. Say it, I said quietly. No one moved. Say it out loud. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. My mom whispered, Betrayal? Say it. My dad exhaled. And then, finally, we put the house in Caleb's name. For a second, I just sat there. Not reacting. Not speaking. Just processing. Because it didn't make sense. Not fully. There had to be more. There was more. I could feel it. And the worst part? No one at that table looked surprised anymore. Just caught. Which meant this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. A choice. Made behind my back. 2 years ago. And somehow, I was the last one to know. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Hands resting calmly in my lap. Okay, I said. My voice sounded normal. Almost too normal. Then I guess I have a few questions. No one spoke. But I could feel it. The shift. They thought I was going to break. Yell. Cry. Cause a scene. I didn't. Not yet. Because something told me this wasn't the full story. And whatever came next, it was going to be worse. Or better. Depending on how you looked at it. First, I said, meeting my grandfather's gaze, I'd like to see those documents. He nodded immediately and slid them toward me. My fingers brushed against the paper, and I had this strange feeling, like this moment was only the beginning. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not physically, just the weight of what it represented. 2 years of something I never knew existed. 2 years of struggling when I didn't have to. I unfolded it slowly. I don't even know what I was expecting. Some mistake, maybe. A clerical error. Wrong name. Wrong address. Something I could point to and say, okay, this is fixable. But no. There it was. My name. Betrayal and Carter. Typed cleanly across the top of a legal property transfer document. Dated.
Signed.
Witnessed. My grandfather leaned forward slightly. That property, he said, calmer now but still firm, was meant to give you a stable start.
No rent.
No debt. Just breathing room. Breathing room.
I almost smiled at that.
Because 2 years ago, I would have given anything for that. Instead, I got double shifts and anxiety headaches. I flipped to the next page. And that's where things got strange. There was a secondary document attached. Different date. Different signatures. I frowned. What is this? No one answered. I kept reading. And then I saw it. A transfer of ownership. From me. To Caleb.
Signed.
Stamped. Processed. My hands stilled. That's not my signature. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't slam the paper down. I just said it flat. Because it wasn't. Not even close. My signature has always been a little messy, loops in the wrong places, slightly slanted. This one? Too clean. Too careful. Like someone trying to imitate it but not quite getting it right. I looked up. Who signed this? Silence. Then my mom said, too quickly, you must have forgotten. It was a while ago.
No.
I met her eyes. I didn't forget. Signing away a house I didn't even know I had. That hit something. She looked away first. My grandfather reached across the table, took the document gently from my hands, and studied it himself. His expression changed. Not dramatically. He wasn't the kind of man to react loudly. But his jaw tightened. That, he said slowly, is not her signature. My dad shifted in his seat. It was authorized. Authorized by who? Grandpa asked. No answer. Robert. That tone again. The one that didn't ask twice. My dad exhaled, long and tired. We thought it was the best decision at the time. For whom? For the family. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a familiar phrase. For the family, which usually meant not for me. I leaned back slightly, folding my hands together to keep them steady. Walk me through it, I said. My voice surprised even me.
Calm. Clear.
Start from the beginning. My mom hesitated. Then she glanced at my dad, like she wanted him to take over. He didn't. So she did. Your grandfather transferred the house into your name, she said slowly. We received the documents. We. I repeated. It was mailed to our home address first, she added quickly. Since that's what your grandfather had on file at the time. That part made sense. I had moved apartments twice that year. It was possible he had an old address. Okay, I said. Then what? Another pause. Then, Caleb needed help.
Of course he did.
I looked at my brother. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. What kind of help? I asked. He was trying to start something, my mom said. A business. He had a plan but no stability.
No que lateral.
And I did. She winced. That's not what I meant. But it was. It was exactly what she meant. You had something valuable, she continued. Something that could support the family as a whole. I tilted my head slightly. By giving it to him. It wasn't like that, she said quickly. We always intended to. Give it back. Silence. There it was. I nodded slowly. Okay. So let me get this straight. I glanced down at the papers, then back up. Grandpa gives me a house. Fully paid. No debt. No one corrected me. You received the documents. Instead of telling me you what? Decide I don't need to know. My dad rubbed his face. It wasn't about you not needing to know. Then what was it about? It was timing, my mom said. Timing.
Yes.
You were busy. Struggling. We didn't want to overwhelm you. I blinked. Overwhelm me. With a house. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. I felt something shift inside me again. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. The kind that settles in slowly and then refuses to leave. You forged my signature, I said. My dad flinched. It wasn't. It is, my grandfather cut in. That is exactly what it is. The room went quiet again. And this time, it stayed that way. Did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. No one answered. I looked at Caleb. You knew. He swallowed. Not at first. That surprised me. When did you find out? A few months after, he admitted. They told me it was temporary. Temporary. That word again. Did you believe that? I asked. He hesitated. I wanted to. That was the most honest thing anyone had said so far. I nodded. Okay. And I meant it. Not okay like I accepted it. More like, I understood the shape of the situation now. And once you understand something clearly, you stop guessing. You stop hoping it's different. You just deal with it. My grandfather leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. How long? He asked quietly. Did you intend to keep this from her? My mom's voice cracked a little this time. We were going to fix it. When? No answer. After Caleb got stable. My dad said finally. After he could stand on his own. And has he? That question hung in the air. Caleb shifted again. I'm getting there. My grandfather's eyes didn't leave him. But you're not there yet.
No.
I exhaled slowly. And for a second, I thought about all the nights I stayed up worrying about rent. All the times I skipped meals to save money. All the moments I felt like I was falling behind while everyone else seemed to be moving forward. And the whole time, I had a house. A fully paid house. Sitting in my brother's name. Because my parents decided he needed it more. I called you, I said suddenly, looking at my mom. She blinked. What? A couple months after this happened. I told you I was struggling. Her face tightened. I remember. You told me to figure it out. I didn't know. Yes, you did. My voice didn't rise. But it landed. You knew exactly what I had. What I didn't have.
And you still said that.
She looked like she wanted to argue. But nothing came out. Another silence. Longer this time.
Heavier.
And then my grandfather spoke again. This needs to be corrected. Simple.
Direct.
No room for interpretation. My dad straightened slightly. It's not that easy. Explain. The property has already been used as collateral, he admitted. That got my attention. For what? I asked. Caleb finally looked up. For my business. Of course. Is the loan paid off? He hesitated. Not completely. I let out a quiet breath.
Of course it wasn't.
So let me get this straight, I said again, because apparently that was the theme of the night. You took a house that was legally mine, transferred it without my consent, used it to secure a loan, and now you're telling me it's complicated to undo. No one argued, because that was exactly what it was.
And here's the thing.
This is the part where most people expect the breakdown. The yelling, the crying, the how could you speech. I thought I might do that too, but I didn't, because somewhere in the middle of all this, I realized something. They had already made their choice. 2 years ago. Over and over again. Every time they stayed quiet. Every time they let me struggle. Every time they chose him. So, what was the point of begging them to feel bad now? Instead, I did something else. Something they definitely weren't expecting. I nodded.
Slowly.
Okay, I said. And my mom looked up, confused. Okay, she repeated. Yeah, I said. I understand now. That made it worse somehow. I could see it on their faces. Because anger, they could handle. Disappointment? Not so much. I gently gathered the documents and set them back on the table. Then I looked at my grandfather. Can I keep copies of these? Of course, he said immediately. Good. I stood up. Not abruptly. Just calmly. Like I was excusing myself from dinner. Where are you going? My mom asked, her voice tight. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. I think I've heard enough for tonight. Betrayal. I'm not angry, I said, pausing just long enough to meet her eyes. That part was true. Not in the way they expected. I just need some time to think. My dad stood up halfway. We can figure this out. I'm sure you'll try. That wasn't sarcasm. It just was what it was. As I walked toward the door, my grandfather's voice stopped me. Betrayal. I turned. If you need support, he said, you have it. I nodded. Thank you. And I meant that too. I stepped outside into the cold night air. And for a second, I just stood there, breathing, letting everything settle. I don't know why, but I expected to feel shattered. Instead, I felt something else. Something quieter, more focused. Because the truth was, this wasn't over. Not even close. If anything, this was just the part where things started to move. And inside, back at that table, they still thought this was a family problem. A misunderstanding. Something that could be talked through. Fixed quietly.
Contained.
They didn't realize yet that it had already gone beyond that. I didn't drive away right away. I just sat in my car, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing in particular. The windshield had already started fogging up from the difference in temperature, and I remember absently drawing a line through it with my finger. I don't know how long I sat there. 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Long enough for everything to replay in my head. The documents. My signature. Fake. My parents' faces. Caleb not looking at me. And my grandfather's voice, steady and certain. This needs to be corrected. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, I muttered to myself. It does. but not the way they thought. I got home a little after midnight. My apartment was exactly how I left it, small, quiet, slightly too cold because I was trying to save on heating. There were dishes in the sink I hadn't had time to wash before leaving, and my laptop was still open on the table, a half-finished spreadsheet staring back at me. Normal life. Except it didn't feel normal anymore. I set my coat down, kicked off my shoes, and just stood there for a second. Then I did something that surprised even me. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't spiral. Instead, I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the documents my grandfather had given me. Every page. Every signature. Every stamp.
Clear.
Centered. Backed up. Then I emailed them to myself. And then to a second email. I don't know why, but something in me said, don't lose this. I barely slept that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my brain wouldn't stop organizing, connecting things, questions turning into possibilities, possibilities turning into something more structured. By morning, I wasn't confused anymore. I was alert. The first call I made wasn't to my parents, or Caleb, or even my grandfather. It was to someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Hey, I said when she picked up. There was a brief pause then. Betrayal?
Wow.
This is unexpected. I smiled faintly.
I know. Sorry.
I should have reached out sooner.
It's okay, she said.
What's up? I hesitated for a second. Then I said it. I think I need a lawyer. Her name is Vanessa Klein. We met during my second year of college. She was studying pre-law at the time, sharp as hell, the kind of person who noticed details everyone else missed. We weren't best friends, but we respected each other, kept in touch here and there. Last I heard, she had joined a small firm that specialized in property and contract law. So yes, she was exactly the person I needed. What kind of situation are we talking about? She asked, her tone already shifting into something more focused. I took a breath. It's complicated. Try me. And so I did. I told her everything. Not perfectly. Not in some polished, chronological way. Just how it came to me. Christmas dinner. My grandfather's question. The documents. The forged signature. The transfer. The loan. By the time I finished, there was a short silence on the other end. Then she said, very calmly, okay, first, don't talk to your family about this again until we figure out a strategy. That got my attention. Strategy? Yes, she said. Because what you're describing isn't just unethical. It's potentially illegal on multiple levels. I leaned back against the wall, my grip tightening slightly on the phone. Multiple levels? Forgery for one. Possibly fraud. Unauthorized transfer of property. And, depending on how that loan was structured, misuse of collateral. I swallowed. Hearing it laid out like that made it feel real in a different way. Heavier, but also clearer. So, what do? I asked. Send me everything, she said. Every document. Every message. Anything you have. I already took photos. Good. Send them now. An hour later, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at my phone while she reviewed everything. When she finally called back, her tone had changed. Not just professional anymore. Serious. Betrayal, she said. This is messy. I let out a small breath.
Yeah.
I figured. But, she continued, it's also very straightforward in one key way. I waited. The original property transfer is valid. It's in your name. Properly executed. Witnessed. Okay. That means legally, the house was yours. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Not relief, exactly. More like confirmation. I never signed anything after that, I said. I can see that, she replied. Because the second document, the transfer to your brother, that signature doesn't match the first one. Not even close. So, it's obviously fake? Let's just say, she said carefully, any competent examiner would have questions. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. And, the loan? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Of course it does. If the property was used as collateral under a fraudulent transfer, the entire agreement could be challenged. I sat up a little straighter. Challenge how? Invalidated. Or at least heavily scrutinized. I felt my heart pick up slightly. Not panic. Something else. Possibility. Here's the thing, Vanessa continued. You have leverage. That word hung in the air. Leverage. I hadn't had that in a long time. Because right now, she said, they're operating under the assumption that you'll handle this as a family matter. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, that sounds about right. But it's not just that, she added. Legally, this could escalate very quickly if you choose to pursue it. I stared at the table. My reflection in the dark surface looked different. more focused. So, what are my options? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Option 1. You approach them privately. Try to resolve it quietly. Transfer the property back. Restructure the loan, move on. I already knew that wasn't going to happen. Too many steps. Too much cooperation required. What's option 2? A slight pause. Then, we make it formal. I didn't answer right away, because that meant something. It meant this wasn't just a conversation anymore. It meant consequences. Real ones.
For them.
For Caleb. For my parents. And I won't lie, part of me hesitated. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because they were still my family. Or, at least, they used to be. I don't know, I admitted quietly. That's okay, Vanessa said. You don't have to decide right now.
I appreciated that.
But I will say this, she added. Whatever you choose, don't go into it unprepared. I won't.
Good.
Because once this starts, it doesn't stay small. I believed her. After we hung up, I sat there for a while. Phone still in my hand. Mind racing, but not chaotically. More like pieces shifting into place. For the first time since last night, I let myself feel something close to anger. Not explosive. Just steady. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a series of decisions. Repeated. Reinforced. Hidden. And every single one of them said the same thing. You matter less. My phone buzzed. A text.
Mom.
Can we talk? I stared at it for a second. Then another message came through. Please don't do anything drastic. We can fix this. I let out a quiet breath. Funny how quickly that word came back. Another message. From Dad this time. We should sit down and figure this out together. Then Caleb. Just one line. I didn't want it to happen like this. I almost responded to that one. Almost. But Vanessa's voice echoed in my head. Don't talk to them until we figure out a strategy. So I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I did something else. Something small but important. I opened my notes app. And I started writing.
Dates.
Conversations. Details. Everything I could remember. Not because I wanted to hold on to it emotionally, but because I knew, at some point I might need it. That afternoon, Vanessa called again. I've been thinking, she said. There's a way to handle this that gives you control without escalating immediately. I leaned forward slightly. I'm listening. A formal notice, she said. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. Just a clear statement of facts. Your ownership. The unauthorized transfer. The expectation of correction. I nodded slowly. And if they don't comply?
Her voice was calm.
Then we take the next step. I looked around my apartment again. The same space that felt too small yesterday now felt like something else. Temporary. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't stuck. Okay, I said finally. Okay, what? Vanessa asked. Let's do it. A small pause. Then,
all right.
I'll draft something and send it over for your review. Thank you. Betrayal? Yeah. You're handling this really well. I thought about that. Then I shook my head slightly. I don't know if I am, I said. I think I'm just done not seeing things clearly. She didn't respond to that. But she didn't need to. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I had a strange thought. 2 years ago, they made a decision for me. Without asking. Without telling. Now, I was about to make one of my own. And this time, they wouldn't get a say. What they didn't realize yet was that this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about control. Truth. And consequences. And once those things start moving, they don't stop halfway. The draft arrived the next morning. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the email notification popped up. For a second, I just stared at it, like opening it would make everything more real than it already was. Maybe it did. I clicked anyway. The document was clean. Precise. No wasted words. No emotion either. Just facts. My name. The original property transfer.
The date.
The fraudulent secondary transfer. The use of the property as collateral. And then, at the end, a clear demand. Reversal of ownership. Full disclosure of financial encumbrances. Immediate cooperation. Reading it felt strange. Because this wasn't how my family spoke to each other. There were no softeners. No, we understand. No, let's work this out together. Just truth. Laid out without apology. I read it twice. Then a third time. I expected to feel nervous. Instead, I felt steady. Any changes? Vanessa texted. I typed, paused, deleted it, then typed again.
No.
Send it. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then, all right. Once this goes out, expect a reaction. I almost smiled. Yeah, I muttered to myself. I figured. The reaction came faster than I expected. 20 minutes. That's how long it took. My phone started ringing.
Mom.
I let it ring. Then Dad. Then Mom again. Then a call from home. Then Caleb. One after another, like if they just kept trying, eventually I'd pick up. I didn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, watching the screen light up over and over again. It was strange. 2 days ago, I would have answered on the first ring.
Now?
I just didn't feel the need to. The messages came next. Mom. Brielle. What is this? Why would you do this through a lawyer? Dad. This is unnecessary. We can handle this as a family. Mom again. Please call me. This is getting out of hand. Out of hand. I stared at that one for a second, because from where I was sitting, this was the first time anything had been in hand. Caleb's message came a little later. Longer this time. I get why you're upset, but this is going too far. You're making it sound like we did something criminal. I read that twice. Then I locked my phone, because there it was. Not apology. Not accountability. Just discomfort. An hour later, Vanessa called.
They received it, she said.
Clearly. How are you holding up? I looked around my apartment again. Same quiet. Same dishes still sitting in the sink. I'm okay, I said. Better than I thought I'd be.
Good.
Because they're probably not. That almost made me laugh. What happens now? I asked. We wait, she said. They'll either respond through me or try to handle it directly with you. They're already trying that. I figured. Don't engage. I won't. There was a short pause. Then she added. But be ready. If they can't talk you into backing down, they might switch tactics. Tactics? Guilt. Pressure. Maybe even shifting blame. I leaned back in my chair. Yeah, that sounds about right. She wasn't wrong. Because that evening the tone changed. The calls stopped. The messages got quieter. More careful. Until one came through that made me pause. From Dad. Your grandfather doesn't need to be involved in this. We can resolve it without upsetting him. I stared at that one for a long time, because that told me something important. They weren't just worried about me.
They were worried about him.
About what he might do next. I didn't respond. But I did text Vanessa. They're trying to keep Grandpa out of it. She replied almost immediately. That means they know how serious this is.
Yeah.
I thought so too. The next morning I got another call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Hello. Brielle. I sat up straight. Grandpa. I received a call from your parents, he said.
Of course he did.
I rubbed my forehead lightly.
Yeah.
I figured they'd reach out. They seem concerned, he added. That was one way to put it. I'm sure they are. A pause. Then. Do you want to tell me what's happening? I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to tell him, but because I wasn't sure how much he already knew. I sent a formal notice. I said finally. Through a lawyer. Silence. Then. Good. I blinked. Good. Yes, he said simply. This is not something to handle casually. I exhaled. A tension I didn't even realize I was holding loosening slightly. Okay. They asked me to stay out of it, he continued. I almost smiled. Let me guess. You're not planning to.
No.
That was it. Just no. And somehow, that one word carried more weight than anything else he could have said. Brielle, he said after a moment, I need to ask you something. Okay. Are you prepared for this to go further? I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. I thought about everything that had happened. Everything I had learned. Everything they had done. And the simple truth was, this was already further than it should have ever gone. I think it already has, I said quietly. Another pause. Then, all right. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, thinking, not about what I might lose, but about what I had already lost.
Trust. Time.
Opportunities one didn't even know I had. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about correction. Setting something back into place that had been deliberately moved. By the afternoon, Vanessa called again. They responded. That got my attention. Already.
Yes.
Through their own lawyer. Of course they did. And she exhaled slightly. They're not denying it. I frowned. They're not.
No.
But they're framing it differently. I sat up straighter.
How?
They're calling it a family decision made in good faith. I let out a quiet laugh. Of course they are. They're also asking for time, she added, to resolve the financial complications. Translation? They needed to figure out how to fix something that was never supposed to be exposed. What do you think? I asked. I think they're buying time, she said. and hoping you'll soften. I nodded slowly. They don't know me very well then. That's what I'm starting to think. There was a pause. Then she said more seriously, but there's something else. What? The bank. My stomach tightened slightly. What about it? They've been notified. I blinked. Already?
Yes.
Your grandfather reached out. Of course he did. And, if the collateral is under dispute, the bank has to review the loan. I felt my pulse pick up. And if they find issues? Her voice stayed calm. They won't wait for a family discussion. I leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling again. So that was it. The point where things stopped being contained. Stopped being something you could smooth over with a conversation.
Because now,
there were other parties involved. People who didn't care about family dynamics. Only facts, documents, legality. Betrayal, Vanessa said, pulling my attention back. This is moving quickly. I can see that. Are you still okay to proceed? I didn't answer right away, because this was the moment. The real one. Not the dinner. Not the discovery. This. The part where I either kept going or stepped back. I thought about my mom's voice telling me to figure it out. My dad saying it was for the family. Caleb looking away instead of speaking up. And my grandfather, quietly making sure I had something to stand on, even if I didn't know it at the time. Yeah, I said finally. I'm sure. Because here's the thing. They thought this was about a house. A piece of property. Something you could transfer, sign over, rearrange. But it wasn't. Not anymore. 2 days passed. No calls. No emotional messages. No attempts to corner me into a conversation. Just silence. The kind that feels intentional. Calculated. Like everyone was holding their breath. Vanessa kept me updated. The bank has opened a review, she said during one of our calls. They've requested documentation from your parents and your brother. How much time do they have? I asked. Not much, she replied. And they don't like inconsistencies. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Good. But the silence didn't last. It never does. On the third evening, right around 7 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but something told me. I already knew who it was. I walked over slowly and opened the door. And there they were, my parents, standing side by side, like they had rehearsed this. My mom looked tense, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. My dad had that same tired expression he always wore when things got complicated, like he was already exhausted by a situation he helped create. Betrayal, my mom said softly. Can we come in? I hesitated. Not dramatically. Just enough to feel the weight of the decision. Then I stepped aside. 5 minutes. They walked in quietly, looking around my apartment like they were seeing it for the first time. Maybe they were. The small space. The worn couch. The stack of unpaid-looking bills on the table. The life I had been managing without them. My mom's eyes lingered on the kitchen. You've been managing, she said. It wasn't quite a question. Yeah, I replied. That was all she got. We sat down. No one rushed to speak. For a second, it almost felt like one of those old conversations we used to have, careful, polite, slightly distant. Then my dad cleared his throat. We received the notice, he said. I figured. This didn't have to escalate like that. I looked at him. It already had.
He didn't respond.
My mom leaned forward slightly. We're here to fix this, she said.
Together.
There it was again. Together. Like that word still meant something solid. Okay, I said calmly. Then explain something to me. She nodded quickly. Of course. Why didn't you tell me? Simple question. No legal terms.
No accusations. Just why.
She opened her mouth.
Paused.
Looked at my dad. Then back at me. We thought it was temporary, she said again. I nodded once. You've said that. Because it's true, she insisted. Caleb needed help. We didn't think. You didn't think I deserved to know? That's not what this is. Then what is it? My voice didn't rise. But it landed harder this time. Because there was nowhere for it to go. My dad stepped in. It wasn't about deserving, he said. It was about priorities. I blinked. Priorities. He nodded. Caleb was in a more unstable position. He needed a foundation. And I didn't. You were handling things. That almost made me laugh. Handling things, I repeated. You mean struggling quietly. You never asked for help. That one almost got me. I felt it hit somewhere deeper than the rest. But I didn't let it show. I called, I said. You remember that? They both went quiet. I told you I was having a hard time. I continued. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for anything specific. I just reached out. My mom looked down. And you told me to figure it out. She swallowed. I didn't know. You did. That was the moment. The one where something shifted again. Because they weren't defending a mistake anymore. They were defending a pattern. My dad exhaled slowly. Look, he said. We're not here to argue about the past. We're here to fix the situation. I leaned back slightly. Then fix it. My mom nodded quickly.
Yes.
That's what we want. Okay, I said. Then here's what happens. They both looked at me, a little surprised. Because I think, deep down, they expected to still be leading this conversation. They weren't. You transfer the property back into my name, I said. My dad opened his mouth. I raised a hand slightly. Fully, I added. No conditions.
No dilas.
He closed it again. You provide full documentation of the loan, I continued. Every detail, every obligation tied to that property. My mom's fingers tightened together. And then, I said, you figure out how to deal with the rest. The rest? She asked, her voice smaller now. The consequences. That word sat there for a second. Heavy. Unavoidable. My dad leaned forward. It's not that simple. I didn't say it was. The loan. I know about the loan. He paused. Then you know it can't just be undone. I nodded. I know it can't be ignored either. My mom's voice came in softer this time. Brielle, if you push this, it could hurt Caleb. There it was. Finally. Not hidden. Not dressed up. Just said. I looked at her. Really looked this time. And I realized something. She wasn't asking me to reconsider. She was asking me to choose him again. I think, I said slowly, he's already been helped enough. Caleb wasn't there. But somehow, that still felt like saying it directly to him. My dad's tone changed slightly. More firm now. Be careful, he said. This could affect more than just him. I tilted my head. Is that supposed to scare me? No, he said quickly. I'm just saying. There are bigger implications here. I held his gaze. Then maybe you should have thought about that before signing my name on something I never agreed to. Silence again. But this time it felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just final. My mom's eyes started to water. We didn't mean to hurt you. I believed her. That was the complicated part. I know, I said. And I did. But you did. She nodded, tears slipping down now. I know. For a second I almost softened. Almost. Because that's the part people don't talk about. How easy it is to go back. To forgive too quickly. To accept something half-fixed just to make the discomfort stop. But then I thought about those 2 years again. And how none of this would have come out if Grandpa hadn't asked that one question. I'm not backing down, I said. Quiet.
Clear. No anger.
Just truth. My dad leaned back, exhaling slowly. I figured. Of course he did. They stayed for a few more minutes.
No shouting. No dramatic exits.
Just a quiet understanding settling in. This wasn't going away. When they finally stood up to leave, my mom paused at the door. Are you really going to take this all the way? She asked. I met her eyes. I already am. They left. The door closed. And just like that, the apartment was quiet again. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. Then I walked back to the table and sat down. Same spot as before. Same room. But nothing felt the same anymore. Because this wasn't about proving a point. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about the house, not really. It was about something much simpler. Something I should have understood a long time ago. You don't keep giving people the benefit of the doubt when they've already shown you what they'll do with it. And now, there was no more doubt left. 2 mornings after my parents showed up at my apartment, Vanessa called me earlier than usual. There was something different in her tone. Not urgency, exactly. More like confirmation. They've submitted documents to the bank, she said. I sat up in bed, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. And there are inconsistencies. Of course there were. I rubbed my eyes. Bad ones. A small pause. Yes. That one word was enough. By noon, she sent me a summary. I read through it slowly, twice, then a third time just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding anything. The loan Caleb had taken out? Larger than I expected. A lot larger. And the timeline, that's where it started to unravel. Because according to the documents, the property had been transferred to him before the loan was approved. But the signature authorizing that transfer was dated after. I stared at that for a long time. Because even without legal training, I knew what that meant. They hadn't just hidden something. They had constructed it. After the fact, I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. I don't know why, but I thought it would be cleaner than this, I muttered. It wasn't. Not even close. Vanessa called again a little later. They're scrambling, she said. I can tell. The bank's asking questions they can't easily answer. Like, why the signature doesn't match. Why the dates don't line up. Why the original owner, she paused slightly, was never notified. I nodded slowly.
Yeah.
Those are good questions. There was a brief silence. Then she added more carefully, Brielle, this is the point where things can shift quickly. How quickly? Fast enough that they may try to reach you again. Not just to talk, but to negotiate. I almost smiled. Now, they want to negotiate. Leverage changes behavior, she said simply. She wasn't wrong. Because that evening, Caleb finally showed up. Alone. I wasn't expecting it. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize him for a second. Not physically, just the way he was standing. Less confident. Less sure of himself. Hey, he said, awkwardly.
I didn't step aside this time.
What do you want, Caleb? Straight to it. No space for small talk. He shifted his weight. Can we talk? I hesitated, then nodded once. 5 minutes. Same as before. He walked in, slower than our parents had. Looked around the apartment like they did. But his expression was different. Not judgmental. Not dismissive. Just uncomfortable. We sat across from each other. The same table. Same chairs. But this felt different. Because this wasn't about explaining. This was about admitting. I didn't know it was like this, he said after a moment. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Like what? He gestured vaguely around the room. I mean, I knew you were doing your own thing, but I didn't realize that I was struggling. I finished. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I nodded slowly. Okay. That word again.
Calm.
Neutral, but not forgiving. He ran a hand through his hair. This whole thing got out of hand, he said. I let out a small breath. Yeah, it did. They told me it was temporary, he added quickly. That we'd fix it once things stabilized. And did you believe that? He hesitated. At first, honest. Again. But still not enough. I leaned forward slightly. Did you ever ask why it was in your name instead of mine? Silence. That told me everything. I didn't think, he started. I know, I said. You didn't. That wasn't even an insult. Just a fact. He looked down at his hands. I needed something to get started, he said quietly. They said this would help. And it did. Yeah. Another pause. But I didn't think it would turn into this. I tilted my head slightly. What did you think would happen? He didn't have an answer. Because there wasn't one. I'm not here to fight, he said after a moment. I didn't think you were. He exhaled slowly. I want to fix it. I studied him for a second. Really studied him. Because this was the first time he wasn't hiding behind our parents. First time he was actually here, facing it. Then fix it, I said. Same words. Same tone. But this time, they landed differently. It's not that simple, he said. I know. The loan. I know about the loan. He looked up, surprised. How much do you know? Enough. That was all I said. Because I didn't need to explain everything. Not yet. He leaned back, clearly trying to process that. They're saying the bank might, he trailed off. Review everything? I finished.
Yeah.
They are. He swallowed. That could shut everything down. I nodded. It could. There it was. The real fear. Not me. Not the family tension. His business. His future. I've put 2 years into this, he said. I know. I can't just lose it. I held his gaze. I didn't get a choice either. That hit. I saw it, the moment it landed. I didn't take it from you, he said, quieter now. I didn't react immediately. Because that sentence mattered. Not because it was fully true, but because it showed how he saw it. You accepted it, I said. He didn't argue. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. And there it was. The question everything had been building toward. I didn't answer right away. Because I wanted to get it right. Not emotionally. Clearly. I want the property back in my name, I said. He nodded. Okay. I want full transparency about the loan. Another nod. Okay. And I want you to handle the consequences of the decisions you agreed to. What does that mean? He asked. It means if the business takes a hit, I said carefully. That's not on me. He looked down again. Processing. That could ruin everything, he said quietly. I didn't soften. Because this was the part that mattered. You built everything on something that wasn't yours, I said. That risk was always there. You just didn't have to think about it. He didn't respond. Because there wasn't anything to say. After a long pause, he nodded. Slowly. Okay. I watched him carefully. Because this wasn't a quick agreement. This was acceptance. I'll talk to them, he said. I'm sure you will. He stood up a few seconds later. No dramatic speech. No attempt to fix things emotionally. Just quieter than when he walked in. At the door, he paused. I didn't think you'd go this far, he admitted. I met his eyes. I didn't think I'd have to. He nodded once, then left. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it for a second. Not tired. Not overwhelmed. Just aware. Because something had shifted again. Not in the legal sense. Not yet. But in something harder to define. For the first time, they weren't treating this like something they could manage. Or smooth over. Or delay. They were starting to understand that this wasn't going to bend. And the truth was, neither was I. Things started moving faster after that. Like a line had been crossed, and now everything on the other side had to catch up. 2 days after Caleb came over, Vanessa called me mid-morning. They've agreed to initiate the transfer, she said. I paused. Phone pressed against my ear. Back to my name?
Yes.
Legally, they don't have much ground to stand on. That made sense. They'll send over the paperwork for review today. I nodded slowly. Okay. But something in her tone told me that wasn't the full update. And I asked. A brief pause. The bank has issued a formal notice. There it was. What kind of notice? I asked. A compliance review tied to the collateral, she said. Because the ownership is being disputed, they're reassessing the loan's validity. I leaned back in my chair. So, worst case, they call the loan. I let out a slow breath. And best case, they restructure it under proper ownership. But that depends on a lot of factors. Like whether Caleb qualifies on his own. We both knew what that meant. Does he? I asked. Another pause. Not from what I've seen.
Yeah.
I figured. After we hung up, I sat there for a while.
Not thinking about them.
Not even thinking about the house. Just sitting with the reality of it. Because this was the part no one talks about. Where things stop being abstract. And start affecting real outcomes. By afternoon, the documents arrived. Official.
Clean.
Formal. A full reversal of ownership. From Caleb back to me. I read through every line carefully. Not rushing. Not skimming. Understanding exactly what I was signing this time. Vanessa walked me through it over a call. This restores your legal position, she explained. But it doesn't automatically resolve the loan. I figured. Once the property is back in your name, the bank will decide how to proceed. And Caleb, he'll need to renegotiate. Or find another form of security. I nodded. So either way things change. Yes. That was the simplest way to put it. I signed the documents that evening. Digitally.
No ceremony.
No witnesses sitting across from me. Just a quiet click. And then it was done. Or, at least, that part was. The call came the next morning. Caleb. I stared at the screen for a second before answering. Hey. His voice sounded different.
Tired.
Not physically. Something deeper. It's done, he said. I know. They transferred it back. I know that too. A short silence. The bank called me this morning, he added. I waited. They're reviewing everything. They said, depending on the outcome, I might have to repay sooner than expected. There it was. The consequence. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. That caught me off guard. Not the words themselves, but the way he said them.
No defensiveness.
No explanation attached. Just there. I didn't respond right away. Because I wanted to be honest. Not polite. Not reactive. Just honest. I believe you, I said finally. And I did. In that moment, at least. Another pause. Longer this time. I should have asked more questions, he said. Yeah, I replied quietly. You should have. I didn't think about what it meant for you, he added. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I know. That was the thing. I did know. But I get it now, he said. I leaned back slightly. Do you? I think so. I didn't challenge that. Because understanding doesn't always show up all at once. Sometimes it comes in pieces. And this felt like one of them. They're not handling this well, he said after a moment.
They?
I asked. Mom and Dad. I almost smiled.
Yeah.
I can imagine. They keep saying it didn't need to go this far. I let out a quiet breath. It already had. He didn't argue. They're worried about Grandpa too, he added. I know. He's not backing down. That didn't surprise me. No, I said. He's not. Another silence. But this one wasn't heavy. Just quiet. I don't know what's going to happen next, Caleb admitted. That makes two of us. Are you okay? He asked. The question felt genuine. And that mattered. Yeah, I said after a second. I am. And I was. Not because everything was resolved, but because I wasn't uncertain anymore. Okay, he said. And for a moment, it almost felt like we were just siblings again. Not in the same place. Not close. But not completely disconnected either. I'll figure something out, he added. I hope you do. And I meant that. Not sarcastically. Not bitterly. Just truth. We ended the call not long after that.
No dramatic closing. No promises.
Just a quiet end. Later that afternoon, Vanessa called again. The transfer is officially recorded, she said. I exhaled slowly. So it's done.
Yes.
The property is legally yours again. I looked around my apartment. Same walls.
Same space.
But something had shifted. And the bank? I asked. They're continuing their review, she said. But now it's under your name. They'll likely reach out to you as well. Great. Her tone softened slightly. Just remember, you're not responsible for decisions you didn't make. I nodded. I know. And this time, I really did. That evening, my mom texted me. Just one message. We never meant for this to happen. I stared at it for a while, because I believed that too.
In a way.
But intent doesn't undo impact. And I wasn't going to pretend it did. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Just because there wasn't anything left to say right now. Instead, I did something small. Something simple. I opened my laptop. And I started looking at the property details again. The house. The one I never knew I had. Photos. Location. Structure. All of it. And for the first time, I allowed myself to actually think about it. Not as something that was taken. Or fought over. Or complicated. But as something that was mine. And it felt strange. Not exciting. Not overwhelming. Just unfamiliar. Because I had spent 2 years living without it. Building a life around not having that kind of stability.
And now?
It was there. But the real shift wasn't the house. It wasn't the documents. It wasn't even the outcome. It was this. I wasn't waiting for them to make things right anymore. Because I already had. The bank called 3 days later. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was avoiding it, just because I already knew what it was about. There wasn't much mystery left anymore. Just steps playing out. Still, I picked up. Hi, this is Betrayal Carter. The voice on the other end was polite, careful, very neutral. They confirmed my identity, referenced the property, and then explained what I had already been expecting. Because the ownership had been disputed, and now corrected, the loan tied to the property was under formal review. They needed clarification, documentation, a statement from me. I kept it simple.
No emotions. No storytelling.
Just facts. I did not authorize the transfer. I did not sign that document. I was not aware the property was being used as collateral. Each sentence felt clean, like setting something back in place. By the end of the call, one thing was clear. They didn't care about family. Only facts. And the facts weren't on my parents' side. That evening, Vanessa called. They've issued a correction notice on the loan, she said. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. What does that mean? It means Caleb has a limited window to restructure under his own credentials, or the bank moves forward with recovery. I closed my eyes for a second. Real consequences. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. How are you feeling? She asked. I thought about it. I feel done. Not angry. Not even relieved. Just finished. The calls from my parents load. Then stopped. The messages followed the same pattern. Careful. Emotional. Then quiet. And then nothing. Caleb texted once more. I'm working on fixing things. I won't involve you again. I read it, sat with it, and then locked my phone. A week passed. Then 2. Life didn't suddenly change in obvious ways. Same apartment. Same routine. Same responsibilities. But something internal had shifted. I wasn't checking my phone anymore. Wasn't waiting. Wasn't replaying conversations in my head. It was quiet. And for the first time, that quiet didn't feel empty. One afternoon, I drove out to see the house. The actual house. 40 minutes outside the city. Simple. Clean structure. A yard that needed attention. Nothing extravagant, but solid. I sat in the car for a bit before stepping out.
I don't know why.
Maybe I needed a second to catch up to the reality of it. When I finally walked up, the key felt heavier than it should have. I unlocked the door. Stepped inside. It smelled like dust and still air. And used space. Sunlight cutting through in thin lines. It needed work, but it was quiet. And that mattered more than anything. I walked through slowly. Room by room. Letting myself feel it without rushing. At one point, I stopped near a window, looked outside, and had a strange thought. This place doesn't know anything about what happened.
No tensión.
No history.
No expectations.
Just space. That night, back in my apartment, I made a decision. Not emotional. Not reactive. Just clear. I blocked their numbers.
Mom, Dad, Caleb.
Not out of anger, not to punish them, but because I understood something now. Access is earned. And they had used it without care. So I removed it.
Quietly. No announcement.
No final message. Just silence. But not from everyone. The next morning my phone rang, and I didn't even need to look to know who it was. "Good morning," my grandfather said when I picked up. His voice, steady as always. "Morning," I replied, softer than I expected. "How are you holding up?" I walked over to the window, watching the early light stretch across the buildings. "I'm okay," I said. Then, after a second, "Actually better." "I heard from the bank," he said. "Yeah, it's moving." "It will," he replied. "That's what happens when things are put back where they belong."
I smiled faintly at that.
We didn't talk about my parents. Or Caleb. Not directly. We didn't need to. Instead, he asked, "Have you seen the house yet?" "I went yesterday." And I hesitated. "It's quiet," I said. "Needs work. But it's good." "That's enough," he replied. Another pause. "Comfortable." "I'm glad you told me," I said suddenly. "Told you what?" "About the house. That night." He didn't answer right away. Then, "You should have known from the beginning." Simple. Firm. "Yeah," I said quietly. We talked a little longer after that. Nothing heavy. Just normal things. Small details. The kind of conversation that doesn't try to fix anything. Just stay steady. After we hung up, I stood there for a second. Phone still in my hand. And I realized something. I hadn't lost everything. Just the parts that needed to go. The next few weeks were steady. I started redirecting my mail. Made a list of repairs for the house. Went out there again. This time with cleaning supplies, a notebook, and no expectations. And every few days, my grandfather would call. Or I would. Sometimes we talked about the house. Sometimes about random things. Weather. Old stories. Small updates. Nothing forced. Nothing emotional, in a heavy way. Just consistent. One afternoon, while I was sitting on the floor of the living room in the house, dust on my hands, windows open, I put him on speaker while I worked. "You're really doing it," he said. "I guess I am." "Good." I wiped my hands on a cloth and looked around. Still empty. Still unfinished. But different now. "It's weird," I admitted. "Starting from something that was supposed to be mine all along." He let out a quiet breath. "Then don't think of it that way." I frowned slightly. "How should I think of it?" "As something you're choosing now," he said. That stayed with me. Because he was right. This wasn't about reclaiming something from the past. It was about building something new. On my terms. That night, as I locked up and stepped outside, I felt it again. That quiet. But now it had shape.
Direction.
And I understood something clearly. I didn't walk away from family. I walked away from what family had become. And I kept what was real. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like a phone call that always gets answered.